do I actually remember that.
Hi, Carla and Amanda.
Hello.
I'm here with Monica Wiggins today. No, we're doing our post-conference. I'm so glad that you let me come in today.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
And her lesson was amazing. If you taught this lesson again next year, is there anything that you would do differently?
One thing I think I would do differently is to get them more familiar. I think they know how to look up words that are used in the text and context clues using that. But when you throw in that mythology element, I think one thing I would do is I would build in a mythology unit and a unit on genre and really hit that first, and then do this lesson directly after that so that they're familiar with that. The mythology characters, and might even introduce some of those mythology characters, because a lot of the kids read those books like Hercules and Percy Jackson and all that, and they don't realize and they don't make the connection. And then when they use those words, I think it would help them to facilitate learning, and they learn deeper by having that base knowledge before we do this lesson. So that's what I would do if I were going to reteach this lesson again.
I think they would see they'd be really interested in a mythology genre study.
Well, it's just something
it.
about the characters. Something about the characters that they're not familiar with, that they can, mythology, it's like, is it make-believe or is it real? Because, even after you left today, some of the kids had the discussion, well, isn't mythology a lie? Because I guess, some of them, their parents may have had, told them. But then I said, it really depends on where you're from. I said, a lot of people really feel like that mythology is these, stories that have been passed down through families that have actually, things that have come to be. So the kids had that kind of discussion as they went along. So.
Oh, great. I saw that there was a misconception, and you were so flexible on how you handled that. How did you use, and how do you use in your classroom, the formative assessment?
Well, and like that, even we did the small group. It was in a small group that they had gotten confused with the context clues versus text structure. So just even with the discussion, the small group discussion, kids talking, and, even one of the kids picked up on, no, that's text structure. So sometimes the kids can redirect themselves and clear up that misconception. But with me being a first-year reading teacher, I do also want to, learn. And that's my goal, is to reach out to reading teachers or maybe resources on the internet where I can find lessons that would help, facilitate and help clear up that miscommunication and that misconception.
You had talked about using an ELA notebook.
Right. Yes. And they do have a notebook that when we do the lesson, we'll do the lesson, we'll, participate in activities, and once I feel like they really have an understanding of it, we'll put it in that notebook. And they make notes in their notebook. That way, when we do move on to something else, and they do, have that misconception, I can say, okay, let's look back in our ELA notebook and refresh your memory, and then they look back like, now I remember it, so then they can distinguish between the two once they look back in their ELA notebook.
I saw your students doing amazing things. What do you feel like your strength is?
Honestly, I feel like my strength is engagement and questioning. I try to come up with questions that elicit thinking and that elicit discussion, not just the right here questions. I try to talk about and even have the students ask themselves questions and dig in deeper. And engagement, I really feel like engagement is one of my strengths, because we use elbow partners, we use table teams. I'll have even cards that say agree, disagree, but then they have to prove it. So everybody's engaged, and they know that at any time they may either have to agree or disagree. And then if they do, I may even have them, we may stand up. I said, okay, now go find somebody that you disagree with. You try to prove your point, they try to prove their point. Does anybody change their mind? So that they're always know that they have to be engaged because I'm going to have to prove my point. I'm going to have to make my statement. So I feel like engagement is one of my strengths.
When you were writing on the board today, there were students watching and students that were not watching all the time. And I know engagement's one of your strengths. What is something that you feel that you could do while you write on the board to engage your students?
And that's one of the things that I think, a lot of times I'll pull up the whiteboards, and they do take notes, but then they tend to doodle on the whiteboards instead of watch. So I thought maybe having a graphic organizer, and that way they've got a graphic organizer in front of them. And then at the end, maybe they can compare their graphic organizers to make sure that everybody's got all the correct information compared to mine. So I'm thinking next time, if I were to do the lesson again, I would have them to have a graphic organizer to go along with what I'm copying on the board. And I think that might help engage them too. Because that's one thing I didn't think about. We were using whiteboards. Of course, it's easy to erase, but then it also kind of makes them want to doodle. I don't know what it is about dry erase markers versus pencil, but they just love to doodle. And I think with that graphic organizer on a piece of paper, plus if they know they could use it to study, they might put more effort into it. Instead of doodling, they might put more effort into that graphic organizer.
I love graphic organizers.
I do too. I use them a lot. And a lot of times, kids, they'll create them in their notebook, a ELA notebook. I'll look at them, and they'll all be different. And, and I can see the different styles of learning when I look in their EL notebooks based on how they've got their information presented. A lot of them will use bullets. Some of them will draw boxes. And so it's unique when you look in their notebooks.
I have 15 minutes before I should leave school. Warning alarm to myself usually.
Yeah.
So that's what's going off right now.
Oh.
So overall, do you feel like your lesson was successful?
I do. I feel like the only thing I didn't get to was the independent practice. So I think that will give me, tomorrow we're going to go, I'm going to kind of review over it, and then I'm going to give them that independent practice. But I do feel like it was successful. The kids were able to discuss, and we worked together as buddies at the end to kind of go back and find a word, because I had them pick out a word, and they were able to highlight the evidence and use the context clues, and so they were able to do it with partners. So I think tomorrow will be the real test on whether or not it was actually beneficial and successful. So we're going to do the independent work tomorrow.
And I saw that assessment all the way through your lesson, that you were listening and you were questioning and so I saw you build that assessment in, so it's neat that you're taking it over to...
And I found, helpful what kids like more. A lot of times you have them circle or you'll have a box them in. I like to use colors, crayons, just like color crayons. So I also went back and looked at their papers to see, did they highlight where I wanted them to? Did they highlight what they needed to in yellow? They just like using different colors. Kids like rainbows. So instead of having them box and circle and underline, I'll have them do in yellow or lime green. And so I was able to see if they were catching on, and most of them did.
I saw even in your script, even in the script, that they were I saw a boy using a yellow colored pencil. And I loved this part where the students were talking to each other. And this is when he had the yellow highlighter. The teacher talks about a cards with a group, and the group in front of me, a boy finds another word. I didn't know this one. He puts a dot by it and shows it to the girl writing. In this group, the girl says, there were a lot of words we didn't know. There are 4 words listed on their card. And it said, did anyone know this word? And the second girl shows the boy, and the boy said, no, I didn't know that one. And the girl writes it down. And then you collected the cards. So I enjoyed seeing that group engage with one another. Do you feel like all of your groups were engaging that successfully?
I do. Overall, over the years you have different groups of kids, and you just see the differences. But this group works really well together. I've had them in various different groups. I try to table team at least, at least every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, just so they have somebody different to work with, because it gets old and they get tired of each other, just like brothers and sisters are going to get tired of each other. But I have placed them in lots of different groups, and usually, even in the, if all, lower level kids end up together, usually there's one that'll pull out and kind of be that leader, and will kind of dig in. And I did another reading lesson where they were reading together, and I have one that's, a pretty low level. He's probably beginning second grade reading level. And it was neat to see, and they kind of did it a little bit today, but he'll stumble on words, and they'll actually just start right beside him, whispering and reading with him quietly. And when they realize he's got it, they stop reading. They're a good group about facilitating each other and asking each other about questions. It's like, wait a minute, is that right? No, I don't think this is right. Let's look back. And usually you'll see that one person. Here's the person that's going through the page, and here's the person that's trying to help, and they do a good job. I mean, and I've just tried to facilitate that this year and get some of those that don't. That's why I emailed you and asked you to kind of watch. There's a couple of boys that are kind of held back, and I want to get them to doing that. So that's my next goal, is to get those ones that want to try and pull them in.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your lesson.
Thank you. I enjoyed teaching it.
Okay, it was only 11 minutes. Oh, it's still going.